Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to it. It is the Michael Dukes Show, just another beautiful day here in paradise on this Monday morning. It is all the days are blending together at this point. Happy Christmas, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. It's that time of year, I guess, is what they're telling me. So it's I hope you're feeling it. I hope you're feeling the Christmas cheer and ready to go here for this beautiful week as we get ready to wrap up what is going to be our final week here leading into the holidays. We will be off the air next week for Christmas. It is our normal Christmas routine. And well, we got a lot of stuff going on because we're going to be taking over some radio stations here starting on January the 1st. We're going to be picking up the reins and heading off into the sunset. And so next week is going to be a busy week with Christmas, obviously, but also a full week of madness. So it's crazy. So it is, yeah, and it's been a wild weather week as well. Last Wednesday it was 43 degrees and green grass was poking up everywhere. And then we got up here on the top of the hill, we got something like 27 inches of snow in 36 hours. And then it got a little cold, and now it's back warm to almost 30 degrees, and it's dripping off the roof. And I mean, wow, it's just crazy. Fairbanks is the same way. Anthony said going from 30 below to almost 40 above in less than a week. It was 30 below yesterday. Now it's 10 above. People are just like, wow, this whole thing is kind of crazy. But anyway, we're welcome to it. It's Monday, and we got a full week of stuff going on. Starting off today with a double dose of minority discussions. Starting off here in hour one with State Representative Kevin McCabe, who is here representing the MatSu area out there towards Big Lake. He's going to come on and talk with us about the this upcoming session, the formation of the minority and everything else. We're going to kind of get some behind the scenes inside baseball. And then in hour two, we're going to have our full discussion with Representative Justin Ruffridge, who we got a chance to talk to last week for just a handful of minutes. So he agreed to come back on this week for a full hour discussion. So we're going to jump into that and get things ready to go. All right. So that's it. That's the full rundown. You guys all ready? Let's get to it and get things ready to rock and roll. We will start off this morning here in hour one. Representative Kevin McCabe is in the green room ready to join us. So let's bring him on the program and get things started this morning, shall we? As he joins us right now. Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
You know, just another beautiful day in schizophrenic paradise as far as weather goes. It it can't make up his mind around here, which it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I hate to tell you, Sarah Vance and I were both in Phoenix over Friday and Saturday, and we kind of watched the snow happen in Homer, and we were talking about you. Welcome to Homer, Michael Dukes.
Yeah, exactly. It was 3.5 hours behind a snowblower on Saturday. That was kind of I hadn't run a snowblower in 40 years, and that was pretty much it was pretty much an education all in and of itself. All right, well, so Kevin, let's get started. We haven't talked in it's been a hot minute since you and I have had a chance to talk, and I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming session. Some of the priorities. The governor's budget came out last week, so we can talk about that. We could talk a little bit about the formation of the minority, and kind of get some answers as to how that went down and what you foresee coming up here into this next session and stuff. But let's just get started right off the bat. You know, what are you concerned about in the upcoming in this upcoming session that we need to be paying attention to and watching?
Well, sure. There's a lot of things that to be concerned with. Not the least of which is the $1.5 billion hole in the governor's budget, which Brad predicted and which actually came to fruition when the governor issued his budget. So we're going to have to be very concerned with the programmed increases that are in there. In fact, one of those increases, I don't know how far you got into the budget and looking at it, but there's $36.1 million in there to pay defined benefits from the last program. We have to add money to the budget to pay for the defined benefits that we still owe from when we shut down defined benefits last time. So that should be of great concern to Alaskans anytime you're talking about a program budget increase, whether it be defined benefits or even an inside the formula BSA.
Yeah, no, as you look at it, and of course, the Reason Foundation predicted that it would cost somewhere in the neighborhood of about $300 million a year for a new defined benefits, although we keep being told that it's cost neutral or it's going to Cliff Grow came on the program and told us it would actually save us money and everything else. Nobody is willing to ask the question of, okay, how do we pay for it? And that's just one of the programs, right? I mean, the defined benefit is just one of the programs. Obviously, everybody seems to have run on the program of increasing the school education funding as well, and not just one-time funding, but a baked into the formula increase in the BSA, which would lock us in for the near future, right?
Sure, and you know, as far as the defined benefits, going back to that just a minute before we get into the BSA, the legislature, there's so much differing information out there that we have got to have a third party come in and look at it. The deep fake fiscal note that has yet to be fully explored was issued or put out by a staffer, frankly. It didn't necessarily come completely from Leg Finance or from OMB or anybody like that. It was built by a staffer, and a staffer who has an agenda. I'm not going to necessarily say his name, but the problem is it's not true. We know it's not true, and it's shaded and slanted and has different maybe expectations in it that don't belong in there. The 7% versus 4% that you've heard. So we need to have a third party come in and really look at this and say, how much is it actually going to cost the state of Alaska every year for the next in perpetuity for as long as we have the program? And maybe once that's done, we should talk about a different plan. Defined benefits is golden handcuffs, and it tends to keep people around, maybe against their will, strictly to not to do a good job or to do work, but strictly to get vested in that. So we need to look at that certainly, as we should look at everything, including the inside the formula BSA. I think the legislature has clearly said that they're uncomfortable with an inside the formula huge increase like that because of what happens to our budget with programmed increases or with program money down the road. and we're willing to fund education as the House majority did last year. We put $322 million into education totally, but we told the school districts essentially that we were not sure that we trusted them to do what they needed to do with the money that we put in the BSA. So we funded major school maintenance, I think $65 million. And we indicated that we were uncomfortable putting that inside the formula, but we're more than willing to fund education when they say they needed it, and they said they needed it, so we funded it that way last year.
Well, not everybody is hesitant to put it in the BSA. I mean, Loki Tobin had an opinion piece out in the paper here recently that talked about. I mean, it used to be 1413, and now some of them are quoting the $1,800 mark that the Anchorage School District was talking about at one point. I mean, we're talking about $600 or $700 million a year increase in education that is locked in. Would have no further discussion. Once that battle's over, it would be increasing every year, no matter what. And that's the one that's really concerning me when you start talking about adding over $500 million to the annual budget, especially as we just saw the governor's budget come out. I mean, we're already upside down. We're up, and you mentioned it, $1.5 billion in the hole. We're $200 million shorter than we were even expecting to be this year, and we were already expecting a deficit. This is a time when we need to start talking about tightening the belt, not just not expanding, not loosening it up, and adding more to the bottom line.
Right, and I understand the education industrial complex, if you will, if you want to use that term, or the business side of education needing funding to keep schools open. But I've said it for years: are the schools there for the children, or are we using our children just to fund schools? That's frustrating to me. The King's Chapel out here in the valley that's up on the hill that they just built, that's been open maybe for a little over a year. It has a private school associated with it that is completely full. So that's been open for a year, and now their private school is completely full. Parents are clearly saying that they don't want to put their children into the public school system for whatever reason, and we need to react to that without considering anything except for the children. And part of the children, of course, is teachers and good quality teachers and funding the school, funding the classes. I get that, but parents are throughout the nation, frankly, are saying that they do not trust and they do not want the programs that are being forced upon their students, whether it be CRT, DEI, ES. They don't want that. They want their children to be taught basic education things, reading, writing, arithmetic, that we have taught for centuries. And they're demanding it, and they're demanding it because they're voting with their feet from the brick and mortar or the neighborhood schools.
Well, the biggest problem, of course, with this increase in education is that this is an exacerbated problem because, again, the enrollment is continued to project. Not only has it been declining, it's projected to continue to decline for the next 10 years. I mean, it's going down further and further. And if they based all their modeling off the number of students and they want to try and maintain the same level of funding for fewer students, it's not going to work out. I mean, it's just not going to work that way. Right.
And we need to be very cognizant of that. And we need to focus on the child. And backpack funding is one of the ways to do it, or, whatever you want to, however you want to coin it. But the money needs to follow the child. And that's, frankly, one of the reasons that the governor vetoed that initial education bill last year, was because most of that had been removed. We said, okay, last year, if you want an inside the formula BSA increase, here is what we want, and let's march together and take care of children together, take care of our education problem together. And and here's what we want to do that. And all of that got stripped out. So the governor vetoed it, and we upheld the veto.
Well, we're going to talk about the governor's vetoes, and we're going to talk about what could possibly happen this session as well with that. We're going to continue. Kevin McCabe is our guest, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, Kevin McCabe is our guest. We are ready to go here, continuing on in this hour with more discussions on what's going on down in the legislature. We're going to talk here probably in the third segment a little bit about the minority and, because they're going to be the line in the sand. They're going to be the line in the sand, and that's what's going to try and hold back the governor's, or uphold the governor's veto or potential vetoes that the governors may have in the future. Kevin, this whole thing with this year's budget, it seems like there's a whole lot of willful blindness from people who just they don't want to acknowledge that we have a problem, right? I mean, they don't want to acknowledge that there is an issue here. They look at it and say, well, we'll just take the PFD and then problem solved. But again, that's a very short-term solution, because once that money's gone, where do you go from there?
Well, 100%. And that's what Jay Hammond said when he said that the militant ring of Alaskans were going to have to stand up and defend their PFD. I've always said that, I've because I voted for a budget 2 years ago, I sort of got a reputation with the PFD folks, but it kind of is what it is. That's what sometimes you have to do in the majority when it finally push comes to shove, is you have to vote for a budget. But at the end of the day, people need to realize or remember, hopefully, that 4 years ago, almost 4 years, little under 4 years ago, I didn't vote for a budget. We didn't vote for I don't know if the fiscal policy working group was established by the minority, essentially, because we would not vote on an effective date for the budget when we needed it, and it would have shut the government down for 20 days. And they knew that. The other side knew that. The majority knew that. And the only possible path forward for them to get our vote, and people forget that Speaker Tilton was and Laddie Shaw, I think, were the ones that agreed to vote for the budget to pass it through. But that was the establishment of the fiscal policy working group, and I was on that group along with Ben Carpenter, and Senator Schauer was a alternate. Senator Hughes was on that group. Mike Prox was the House Minority alternate, and we spent 80 hours or 90 hours working that over the space of 6 weeks over our summer, trying to find a path forward, a compromise, if you will, or a path forward to establish a fiscal policy working group. So that was very important, and then it just kind of got swept under the rug. And one of the things we agreed on was that we were going to put all the facets or all the pieces of the plan through together. And it turns out that there's almost no way to do that under our Constitution. So we had to have them as separate pieces, but sort of run together. And we attempted to do that through Ways and Means last year, Carpenter's committee that both Speaker Tilton and I sat on, and Carpenter. So now you have two people that were on the fiscal policy working group sitting on that committee trying to push those pieces forward. And man, it was just like swimming upstream. It was a difficult thing to do. So
Yeah, no, it seems like everybody was gung ho, and again, maybe we should talk about that on the other side because, here was a group of the most diverse people you could find, opposite sides of the political spectrum, yet they unanimously came together with a compromise, which means nobody's really happy in the end, but with a compromise, it basically said we all have to do things. We have to do all of these things together at once. We can't piecemeal it, and yet here we are trying to piecemeal it again. Fat Ray over YouTube says the Democrats, the party of what do you mean my actions have consequences? Question mark. But it's not just the Democrats. That's the other thing. It's also there's Republicans in there who are doing exactly the same thing. Let's continue on. All right, here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty based, free thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right. Let's continue. Our guest is Kevin McCabe. We were just talking about in the break the Fiscal Policy Working Group, and unfortunately, one of the biggest staunchest stalwarts of that proposal, Ben Carpenter, has not been reelected to the legislature. So I've been wondering if somebody was going to pick up the mantle. You were part of the Fiscal Policy Working Group back when it was there. Some people have said it was a distraction. It was smoke and mirrors. It was whatever it was. It was it's not accomplished anything. Well, part of the problem is that there's been reticence. I mean, the Fiscal Policy Working Group was put together as a compromise because the minority would not vote on an effective date for the budget a couple of years ago, and this was a way to try and put together a full fiscal plan. They wouldn't do it because there wasn't a full fiscal plan, right? I mean, that was the reason, and you guys came together on all this.
Sure, 100%. Yeah, the Fiscal Policy Working Group was born out of that year when the minority was the first year I was elected, and the minority had clearly said that we were not happy with the budget, and it was driven by the PFD that year. We weren't happy that we were taking the people's PFD, and we wanted a path forward. One of the things that the Fiscal Policy Working Group was supposed to discuss and establish was a way to fund the PFD the way it should be funded for the people. So the genesis of that, or the result of that, was the Fiscal Policy Working Group, which included, as I said earlier, Carpenter and myself, and Senator Schauer was an alternate, Senator Hughes, and we attempted to find a path forward. And some of those paths we didn't like as Republicans. Heck, one of those paths was increased revenue. Well, what does increased revenue actually mean? And just because we discussed taxes, Ben Carpenter unfortunately got labeled as the tax man on the Kenai, which was unfortunate, because I think that as adults and as Republicans, we need to explore every item. Nobody wants to increase taxes, but we have to tell Alaskans, we have to give Alaskans what their options are. Okay, Alaskans, do you want an $1,800 inside the BSA increase in education? Who pays? Who pays for that? How are we going to pay for that? And we need to find that way. And we need to say clearly to Alaskans, if you want defined benefits, if you want an inside the formula BSA, then it's going to take revenue, because right now we have not developed our resources enough to generate the revenue that we need to fund government. So we either need to find a way to pay for it, or we need to find a way to shrink it. And we try to put all those options on the table with the Fiscal Policy Working Group. And it's a short document. I would have wished it was longer and included more of our discussion and more of our points, but we had to get away from the too long not read thing and sort of produce a document that everybody would read. And truthfully, Jonathan Christ Tompkins was the he was the head of it, or the chair of it. He sort of drove the committee, and we had some really hard discussions. He and I. He called me once and he said, "Kevin, this group is not going to pivot around your idea that we pay all Alaskans a full PFD." And we had it was a difficult discussion. We talked for a couple hours.
Well, and that's the thing. The fiscal policy working group was made up of one of the most diverse groups of people you've ever seen, both chambers, both majority and minority, pro big government people, pro small government people. And so in the end, it was a compromise, which means nobody's happy. That's what a real compromise means, is that everybody takes a little bit on the chin. And yet here we sit. Now we have some legislators who said they believe in it and they're stalwart champions of it and they're going to carry it forward. But I mean, they had opportunities last year to do the same thing. So I don't know exactly what they're going to do different. And now Ben Carpenter is leaving, and he really was one of the main proponents and the pressure drivers behind this. So what happens now with the work of the fiscal policy working group?
Yeah, well, the people that are left that were on that group are getting smaller and smaller. So really, it's just Mike Prox and I. Prox was an alternate, and I was on the group itself. With Carpenter leaving, it's just Mike Prox and I. I think on the other side, Calvin Schrage was on it, and Grier Hopkins was on it, so he's gone. The Senate, Senator Keel was on it. Senator Hoffman was on it. Senator Hughes was on it. Schauer was an alternate. So the Senate actually has a greater number of folks on there. And maybe it's time to put it back together and see what we can find. See if there's a path forward. Fiscal policy working group 2.0, if you will. Right. One of the things I want to say about that, though, in one of the larger discussions that we had inside that group, or a discussion, was the fact that paying a full PFD in and of itself is a pseudo spending cap, right? I mean, if you pay the full PFD and there's no money left to pay the other programs, then Alaskans or the legislature needs to decide which programs we are not going to fund. So wouldn't it be nice to say, nice is the wrong word, but wouldn't it be to say, hey, we're going to pay a full PFD to every Alaskan right now, including children, to help fund our economy, to help get the free money into the economy to fund our small businesses. We're going to pay that PFD, but we're not going to pay defined benefits this year. So, instead of, it'd be difficult because our Constitution says that the retirement needs to be paid, but the Constitution,
Right. Well, it would put the shoe on the other foot, because we've been focusing so much on what the public economy is doing, what the government economy is doing. We've totally ignored the effect on the private economy, and that's a dangerous step.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a minute. You mentioned before we went to break, you were talking about the governor's veto of the education bill, and he said that he's not a fan of defined benefits. He made that clear last session. He's not a fan of an educational spend that's inside the formula and has no accountability. And so he could be exercising his veto powers again this go around. And that means that he's gonna need some support if that's the case. Now, first and foremost, if they spend the entire session building these bills that they know that the governor's going to veto, that tells you something right there in and of itself, that I think that they're not really serious about fixing the fiscal problem here. They're just doing it for political reasons, and they're going to paint the governor in the corner as saying, well, he's the one that made the decision, which means the governor really needs to come up with some good messaging that says, here's where we're at, here's where we're going to be in the future, here's what it looks like, and this is why I'm vetoing it, because we can't pay for it. I mean, there should be some very clear messaging when the governor vetoes it. But what does it mean for the governor's vetoes? How are the minorities strong enough? Are they going to be holding together to, I guess, especially since you're in the House here, you could talk about the House, but what does it look like as far as a veto-proof situation. What do you see? Is that going to be the only answer this year, with a minority being what it is in both bodies?
Well, yeah. So we have 19 Republicans in the minority right now that are need to start pulling on the same in the same direction on the oars. It's frustrating that our forming of the minority, which really should take 2 or 3 hours. I mean, we know we're in the minority, or and so we form. We have spent a lot of time trying to discuss and put ourselves together and find a minority leader, and there's all the politics that is surrounding that, and find somebody to move us forward. And I think our discussions on how we're going to handle a governor's veto, or the education, or the energy, or defined benefits has suffered. So the only possible way that we can move forward is if we are 19 strong and willing to override, or to uphold a governor's veto on those things. And our problem is right now is we don't have an alternate plan. So defined benefits, what's our alternate plan? Last year we had, I can't remember, I think it was 200. I don't remember if it was, I think it was HB 200 was a defined contributions plan. And certainly we need to have a plan going forward. So we all agree there's out migration. We all agree that the DOT and other government entities that we need, troopers, others, VPSO, are struggling to keep people, and possibly, although the data would indicate otherwise, possibly the retirement system available to those workers is part of the solution. And so if we are going to put a program in place to help keep workers around, we need to have an alternate program. If we're going to say no to defined benefits, then we're going to have to say yes to something else, and find a way to do that. And frankly, I'm a big proponent of defined contributions and self-managed retirement, because, well, you've heard me say it before on this program, I can't think of a worse entity on the planet to manage my retirement than the state of Alaska and the state legislature.
Well, and that's the problem. You got to have alternates, like you said. I mean, there was a discussion on increasing the defined contribution to help make it more attractive. I know even the Reason Foundation said that could be a potential solution for part of our problem, is by increasing the defined contribution. And it's a it's a one-time or it's a smaller long-term expenditure in that regard. But again, the biggest problem is there's not enough money. Something's got to change, and yet it seems like there's a lot of people out there that just they don't seem to want to acknowledge that component, that it is what it is, and they're going to keep going until, I guess, the wheels come off the bus. Is that the problem?
It sounds like it. We have got to we got to consider the long-term consequences. We have to find a path forward to understanding the long-term consequences of our actions today. The legislature, we're cathedral builders. We're building for our children and our grandchildren, not for us. And are we going to saddle our children and our grandchildren with possibly, according to the Reason Foundation, $9.2 billion worth of debt in the next 10 years? That will be extremely frustrating. But what are we going to do? There's the other side of the coin is, how are we going to keep and attract and keep state workers to plow our roads?
Right. Well, yeah, but you don't bankrupt the state you've got what, 50,000 state employees. I mean, between the university and all the other things, somewhere between 40 and 50,000 overall employees. You add in some, but I mean, we're talking about a workforce of 270,000 people. You can't just sacrifice the entire economy for the benefit of a third or quarter or a third of them. You just can't do that. There's got to be another way. And you said we're cathedral builders, but are we really? Because it doesn't seem like anybody in the legislature is thinking beyond the next year, or maybe the next two, maybe the next election cycle. We're not thinking generationally. We're not thinking 10, 15, 20 years down the road. It's always, what is it next year?
Right.
And that's the problem we have right now, right?
Oh, I agree. And look at the Chinese. They think 100 years down the road. We need to be thinking like that. And maybe I should have said the legislature should be cathedral builders, because we're clearly not. We are just thinking 2 years down the road, or even 10 years. Even the Reason Foundation. Yep, the defined benefits is going to cost us $9.2 billion in 10 years. Well, does that mean $18.4 billion in 20 years? Or does it go up, exponentially? Does it follow a straight trajectory, or does it go up to $50 billion in the next 20 years? We need to be thinking longer term.
As these people retire, that stuff just goes up. That's part of the problem with defined benefits, is that it hockey sticks at the end of the term. So
right.
Anyway, we're going to continue here with Kevin McCabe. We're going to talk about minority formation up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're continuing now with Kevin McCabe in the chat room. Here, let's see what Jeannie says. And I think this is, this is part of that kind of misinformation that they say, well, they're leaving because the retirement system's so bad. But even Jeannie's saying a good retirement isn't worth putting up with tyrant employers. And I think you'll find that if you did exit interviews, and we asked somebody, it's been within the last year, we asked somebody about this, were they doing exit interviews to find out what people were leaving? And they weren't doing exit interviews of everybody, but I don't even think that the retirement was the biggest problem. Of course, is culture, employee culture and work environment and things like that. That's what drives most people out, not necessarily compensation or retirement. I mean, the retirement is even the smallest part of the compensation. I think that's been a bigger problem. I mean, right, Kev? Because some of that stuff is showing that.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a very dated, I think 4 years ago, when I asked the Commissioner Cockrell during a finance subcommittee hearing for DPS and state troopers, I asked them if they did exit interviews, because that was a pretty normal part of the airline industry, is exit interviews. Why are you leaving? Pretty normal part of any employer job. And I think, and I could have this a little bit wrong, but I think 9% of the people were leaving because of pay. 9% of the people were leaving because of retirement benefits. A higher percentage were leaving because of health care benefits. But the overall huge majority of people were leaving because of leadership, the culture, and the job and the things that they were expected to do. Now, yes, some of that might have been the excess overtime, because of lack of employees. But I think every department in the state of Alaska should be doing exit interviews with the people as they leave. We just have to establish why they're leaving, so we understand how we can fix that. And we're just making an assumption that they're leaving because there is no defined benefits retirement program, and I don't necessarily believe that's true.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Anthony said the private economy can be best described as, quote, a battle of attrition against the government who's intent on taking all of your money for the purpose of helping you make more money so they can have more of your money. I mean, I think that's an Alaskan thing for sure, because again, we don't really care about what's happening in the private. As long as the government economy is moving along, we feel like everything's fine. And that's a real problem in this state.
Right. I'll tell you, Michael, if I was a union negotiator for one of the teachers' unions, or for one of the city police department unions, or one of the fire department unions, to me, this would be a golden opportunity to negotiate a better defined contribution retirement for my union members. You go to the city and you say, Anchorage or Fairbanks or Juneau or whoever, and you say, hey, look, the state is struggling with this defined benefits program. It would normally cost the city or the employing entity, the borough, X amount of dollars to send to the state to fund this defined benefits retirement program that's run through the state. Why don't we take that same amount of dollars and give it to our employees, our union members, as a defined contribution, which would increase our DC, the contribution that the entity, the borough or city or whoever, increase the contribution that they provide. It would give our members a better defined contribution retirement plan. It would cost the city the same, and it would be better for us, and we could manage it ourselves through a management company such as Fidelity or whoever. And to me, it's a missed opportunity for the negotiators right now, and it's a little frustrating to see that go by the wayside just because we're so focused on one solution instead of a solution.
Interesting. Donna just said in the chat room, she said, I just retired from 26 years of the KPBSD, no exit interview. I mean, how does why? I mean, it's something as simple as I'm retiring, or I got a better job, or I don't like it's it's kind of crazy that this is where we're at. And like you said, people just assume that it's because of the defined benefits. They just assume it may be because of the wages, where most of the time it has to do with leadership. They don't quit bad jobs, they quit bad bosses, or they quit bad cultures, kind of thing. And it's crazy. All right, Kevin McCabe is our guest. We're going to talk about the formation of the minority, a little insider baseball here for what we can talk about, because I know a lot of that stuff is hush hush. But we're going to continue here in just a moment. Kevin McCabe is our guest. The Michael Duke Show. Please like and share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that kind of stuff. Let's get to it. Here we go. Jumping back in right now.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right, Kevin McCabe is our guest. He is the representative for the MatSu out there in the Big Lake area, KGB Big Lake, my former representative. Kevin, we heard a lot of stuff, and I've heard some things behind the scenes baseball there of kind of some back chatter about some of the things that happened during the formation of the minority, which has got me a little concerned. Kathy Tilton has been a pretty strong force. She was a minority or majority leader last year, and she did a good job of trying to keep all the, it's like herding cats with a shotgun kind of thing. She really kind of got all that put together, and I expected her to come back, but then I understood that there was some horse trading and wrangling in the middle of that here, and of course now we have Mia Costello, who's a good egg. But she's come up as the majority leader. And I mean, what's going on here? Do we have a strong minority? What happened during the formation that you can share with us? Because I know some of that stuff is, like you said, it's supposed to be behind caucus doors. But what can you share with us? And do we have a strong minority, or are you concerned about a fracturing or whatever else?
Oh, I'm very concerned, Michael. Yeah, we have 19 very strong, opinionated Republicans that are varied across the spectrum of conservatism to more moderate representatives, and we have to find a way to come together. Let me first start by saying, inside we have an agreement amongst the 19 of us. Typically, that's the first thing that you agree on is, hey, in order to be free to speak our minds inside caucus, and sometimes it gets very contentious and very, we argue and fight like a family. But in order to be able to speak our minds inside caucus, we agreed that what happens inside caucus stays inside caucus. It's a little frustrating that some of it has already come out in the ADN, but since it has already come out, when we talk about formation such as finance committee chairs say. There were 9 people that were running for finance seats, and there was more than one from the Kenai that was running for a finance seat. So clearly, we do need to have geographic representation, but it needs to be the right geographic representation. And there's more senior members on the Kenai that might want a finance seat, and Representative Ruffridge, I think, is incorrect in saying that previous votes were a consideration for me, and I can only speak for me because that's me. But for my discussions and for me, any previous votes or any previous history in the legislature were the furthest thing from my mind and from my discussions when we talked about and discussed who was going to be on the finance. For my vote, I didn't even consider anybody's previous votes. So yes, Speaker Tilton would have seemed to be the normal path forward. I don't think that people, even I, don't understand how much she put into that job as the speaker in order to keep us together. And I have a different view of the way the structure should be. I believe that a minority leader should actually be the leader. The Speaker of the House is the Speaker of the entire House, and she has a different function than trying to keep the minority or the majority together. So for the last 2 years, Speaker Tilton did the entire thing all by herself. And I think that frustrated a good number of members, and they didn't quite understand that the way I understand it, and they decided that it was all her fault and that they were going to oust her. And that is sort of the way it happened. I'll tell you, when I first went down there, people told me, all you have in this building is your word. And they told me that your honor is paramount and you need to grow thick skin. Well, it turns out that every legislator down there, myself included, has pretty thin skin, and honor seems to be left at the doorstep, and your word is something to be broken. So Speaker Tilton had, in my opinion, had the majority of the votes going into that vote. And I can't really say much about anything else that happened inside the door of that room.
Right. Well, I mean, it is frustrating. Like you said, the ADN had some of the insider baseball there, and they were talking about it. Ruffridge, I didn't know that Ruffridge wasn't the only rep from the Peninsula that was up for a finance seat. I mean, I can guess who else would have been there since there's only a couple, but it's frustrating to watch this kind of stuff go on and then hope against hope that folks are going to stick with their word and are going to stay strong in this idea of smaller, more limited government, trying to find a way to make the long-term fiscal choices instead of the short-term, just to next election cycle fiscal choices. And that's frustrating. And if we do have a problem where the governor does veto and we have some folks who decide to defect, I mean, I'm all for people being able to vote their conscience and vote their mind, but at the same time, boy, there's got to be some long-term thought here on this, because we can't afford to pay for what's going on right now. We can't continue with business as usual.
Sure. And if I were a more moderate Republican and I was in a caucus of 19 or however many people, I would love to have people to the right of me in my caucus, so that you don't start any kind of discussion or any kind of defined benefits. We don't come all the way to the other side's position as a starting point. We start over here on the right and say no defined benefits because it's going to cost us too much. And they start over on the left and say, yes, we all want defined benefits because it's going to keep workers around and out migration and all that sort of thing. And then as you discuss, you kind of come towards the middle. So as a moderate Republican, if I were one and I was in the middle, I would love to have people to the right of me putting their position forward, putting that right position forward. So as it came closer to my moderate position, I would be able to jump on board and blame them is the wrong word, but say, yes, this is where our caucus finally ended up. This was the compromise, and it's right square with my position. That's why, it's the whole ask for 50, expect 20, and get 10 kind of idea of negotiation. And you don't start at their position, and that's the problem with some of our more moderate folks. I think they're too willing to start at a moderate position instead of starting at a position that where we should be starting.
That's kind of what the other side demands, right? I mean, the
Right.
second you even come to the table, they're like, we're at the 10-yard line, you're at the 10-yard line, but we want to be at the 50-yard line. And as soon as you agree to compromise or agree, they're like, okay, we're at the 50. And they're like, no. We've got to work our way to the middle on this. And that's
Sure.
part of the problem.
The full PFD discussion is a classic example of that. Classic. I mean, we started out at the 100% full PFD, and then they said 50-50, and we went back and forth, and we said, okay, 75-25, and they said, oh, good, you're at 75. Now we need to go less than 50-50, and they keep moving the goalposts, and unless you stay strong on your position, you're going to get drugged into a position you don't want to be.
Kevin, we're down to less than 2 minutes here. So final thoughts on this upcoming session and the minority, the governor's vetoes, the hot button issues. Final thoughts.
Well, the very first thing that we're going to be faced with when we get down there is, we have 5 days from the time we gavel in on the 21st to discuss overriding the governor's vetoes from last session. And that's going to be, people aren't talking about that. That's one of the reasons that we need to have minority caucus discussions before we get down there, have a position before we get down there, have a strong leadership, and sort of put Humpty Dumpty back together again and find a path forward for 19 strong Republicans to unite and decide whether or not we're going to override the governor's veto or whether or not we're going to uphold those. So we need to be getting together. We need to be finding our path forward. And, that's going to be my focus in the next 2 to 3 weeks is putting us, getting us all together in a room personally. Zoom is great. Teams is great, but you can't necessarily see body language, facial expression, and all that sort of stuff.
No, I mean, if we start off overriding the governor's vetoes, we're going to be even more upside down than we are right now at this point, which is that's saying something at this point.
Totally agree.
Kevin McCabe, thank you so much for coming on board. Folks, up next, Representative Justin Ruffridge, The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. All right, Kevin, I give you the final bite at the apple here. I mean, I hadn't even really thought about that much because, I guess just because of the financial situation of where we're at, I hadn't even thought about overriding the governor's vetoes. And if there is a concerted push to change some of this stuff, our bad position would go from bad to even worse at this point in the upcoming weeks at the beginning of the session.
Right. Those are things that, people aren't necessarily considering. Not only that, but there's a CBR override needed in the governor's budget. I haven't seen that before, where the governor's budget says, you're going to need a huge vote from the entire House to get into the CBR to fund this or to fund that. And, it's frankly disheartening, as well as the supplemental budget. There's a big supplemental budget that's coming up that we're going to need, and nobody's thinking about that either. So we need to have those discussions. We need to put ourselves together in a manner that will have a cogent position going forward. And right now we're just squabbling.
How big is the supplemental? Have you heard? I mean, have you heard the kind of the discussion of where it's at?
There's so many numbers floating out there. I would hesitate to say, but usually when I discuss it with somebody that's in in a position to know. I kind of get a frown and a worried look on their face, and I'm very concerned that we're going to need money right now that we're not going to have.
Yeah, well, I mean, we start talking about $200 million supplemental budget when we're already $1.7 billion starting off in the hole. I mean, things get real sticky real fast at that point.
Right. And, we need to quit. I think we need to quit squabbling and focusing on ourselves and on which seat we did or did not get. And, at this point, regional representation on finance, yeah, it's a goal, but it's not a set in stone rule. We would all love to do that, but we need to quit our squabbling and unite together and find a path forward for us, because it's going to take all of us to be a roadblock if we need to, or to push things forward if we need to.
Yeah. Well, again, I just don't understand how you overcome the size of the deficits we're talking about. I mean, the only readily and easily available pot of money is the permanent fund,
Right.
dividend. I mean, the dividend itself, right? Because they're going to take $3.7 billion from the permanent fund as a draw. And, if the dividends account for $1.8 billion of that, and we're 1.5, 1.6, $1.7 billion upside down, that's a pretty easy math. But what does it do for us in the following year and the year
Right.
after that and the year? I mean, again, eventually that money will be gone. And then what do? We can't keep kicking this can down the road.
Right. And, on the fiscal policy working group, it was one of the discussions we had. How are we going to get money? Where are we going to get the revenue? And I think that we put together, in memories a little bit dim, but I think if we had a 10% income tax, the most it would have raised is $700-ish million. The amount just wasn't enough in an income tax to cover our shortfall. So, it rapidly became apparent that we needed to do something different. Resource development was my idea. That's whether it be the West Assitna access or logging or some sort of resource development, we need to get that on board now. Even if it's just small, we need to start moving that way. Unfortunately, we get shut down at every turn by people that would rather see a log trail, which has almost zero return on investment, but they would rather spend $14 million on a long trail than they would spend money on our logging industry to get resource development, or whether gold and Nova Minerals and the antimony that they have found at the top of the West Assitna access. We become too concerned with the possibility that we might damage a little bit the environment. And, Alaskans are famous for not doing that, but just in case we might possibly have
Right.
have a means to do that, they want to shut everything down. And I think it's a mistake.
Yeah.
But,
All right. Well, Kevin McCabe, thank you so much for coming on board with us this morning. We appreciate you being part of it. And we look forward to seeing what happens here at the beginning of the session, which is just 4 weeks away now, 3.5,
Right.
4 weeks away. So,
right.
all right, Kevin, thanks so much for coming on board. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.
Have a Merry Christmas.
You as well.
All right. Thanks so much. Kevin McCabe, our guest here on the program. I see Justin Ruffridge is in the green room. Let's test his audio real quick before we go to break, and make sure that everything there is good to go. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. I'm well. How are you?
Good. Okay. Got a little bit of background noise there, but let me just pull your mic down just a bit, and we will see where you're going here. All right. We should be good, and we'll be back to you here in just a moment. Okay. Oh, did you cancel? Oh, you muted yourself.
That's me.
Okay.
Helping
right.
with your background noise.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it. Put him back in the green room for a minute here as we get things ready to go. All right, folks. That's it for hour one. We're going to jump into it with hour two. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. It is Monday, and we're getting ready to go. This is the last final full broadcast week of 2024 because Christmas is basically a week away. Week and a day. It's 8 days away from Christmas Eve it's Wednesday, next Wednesday. We will be off the air starting on Monday of next week, and we'll be returning on the 2nd, which is actually pretty good timing because I'm going to be, we're taking over the radio stations on the 1st of the year. So I'm going to be busy for the next 10, 12 days right now, 15 days. And so we're getting things ready, but this is the last full week of broadcast for 2024. And we're getting things ready to rock and roll. And hopefully I will still be here with all my hair on the 2nd of January. I guess if I show up on the 2nd of January and I look all patchy and bald, there's a reason for it, but we'll be all squared away. This week continues. We've got a big thing. We just finished up with Representative Kevin McCabe talking about the upcoming session as a minority member. And now we've got in hour 2 here, our full discussion with Representative Justin Ruffridge, who is coming on. We got a chance to talk to him for about 7-8 minutes here last week. He was traveling, so we had some confusion and some challenges there. Then now we're going to do it. He came back. He agreed to come back on for a full 1-hour discussion. We like the long form. I like to be able to kind of ramble and discuss and see where the conversations lead us. And so we're going to jump into that. Right now, Representative Justin Ruffridge joins us on the program, and he is with us right this hot second. Good morning, Representative. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. I'm doing well. And so the radio stations that you're taking over next week, are they here on the Peninsula? Is that what I heard?
Yep. All the stations down here on the Peninsula, KGTL, KPEN, K-Wave, and K-Bay. All 4 of those stations will be part of our portfolio. So we'll be broadcasting across the Peninsula, also out to Kodiak and on Alaska, Dutch Harbor, all the way up to Fort Greely and Delta. So yeah, big footprint. Lots of stuff happening. I'm not getting much sleep, and I'll actually be looking forward to the new year. Maybe we can get a little rest in the new year. We'll see what it does right now. But the next 2 weeks is going to be a busy time for sure. So we'll get into that. Representative, I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming session. Last week we spent a segment essentially talking about formation of the minority, so we don't have to necessarily go into that. But let's talk about the big issues, and let's talk about, now that the governor's budget is out and we've had a chance to kind of digest a little bit of it, understanding where we are fiscally, and that's going to be the big challenge, is where we are fiscally, because we're in trouble. And I don't know how many people are actually acknowledging that we're in trouble, but we are in trouble. We're $1.6 billion upside down to start with. We're $200 million more in the hole than we expected, because they based the budget on $73 a barrel for oil. And we're down in the 70. It could be as low as $68 a barrel, which is another $200 million. And we've got a lot of people talking about all the things that they want to bring us, all the bells and whistles, defined benefits, more education spending inside the BSA, potential royalty relief or other payments to subsidize gas. There's a lot of things coming up. Let's talk about your reaction to the governor's budget and the potential shortfall. Well, not potential. I mean, it's a real shortfall that we are facing, not just this year, but for the coming 10 years.
Yeah, well, I'll try to make it pretty simple for your listeners, Michael. We have three options facing us, and I think it's easy to talk about the fun stuff, right? The things that people really like to talk about. Spending's fun to talk about, but three things we have ahead of us. We can either have a $0 permanent fund dividend at some point in the very near future. We can either institute a tax of some sort, or we can do whatever it takes to increase our revenue from our natural resources. And I think I heard Representative McCabe mentioning something along those lines. And those are really our three options in front of us. None of them are easy or quick options to accomplish. And truthfully, we're a little bit in a hole that we need to climb out of. And those three options, I think one obviously sticks out as the right answer, but we have a lot of work to do to get down the road where we're producing enough of our natural resources to cover the gap and be able to pay a dividend. So I think that's just it's clear. You spend more than 1 year in the legislature. I don't know why we're not talking about it at that level. I think you do. I appreciate what Mr. Keithley has to say in just bringing that forward. But truthfully, even in no offense to Mr. Keithley if he's listening, but I read his stuff from time to time, and even as a person who's engaged in this on a regular basis, you get about 2 paragraphs in, and it's just not exactly highly entertaining reading. So I think it just loses people.
It's depressing. Well, but I mean, that's the problem, Justin, is it's the hard truth. I mean, you say we've got the three options, to take the PFD, the resource development, or, the reducing the cost of government. And the problem is one of those, I mean, you're right. One of those is immediate. Taking the PFD is easy. Taking the PFD is a simple solution. Resource development probably has the longest tail on it, right? Because if we decide to open an industry or support an industry, it's going to be, 3 to 5 years before we really even, on the outside, before we start to see something. And cuts, or living within our means, reducing the size and scope of government, that's just not sexy. Like you said, people start reading some of this stuff and they get scared, or they get discouraged or whatever, and they just stop because it's not fun. But that's the thing. This is finances. It doesn't necessarily have to be fun. It has to adhere to arithmetic. And unfortunately, you said one of those is the obvious option. And I'm in agreement with that. But the problem is it's always going to be the easy option, which is at this point taking the PFD. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. And it's been that answer for way before my time in the legislature. And, you look at the numbers that you're presented for the last 2 years, and it becomes clear without some sort of change, and some sort of change in the very near future, the PFD is also going to be gone. And I think that should wake people up. But for some reason, it doesn't seem to have done so. We spent the last 2 years working through all of the items inside of what the Fiscal Policy Working Group put forward. and we were the majority at that point. And Representative Carpenter did essentially 2 years worth of work, and I don't think we did not pass one of his items on the fiscal plan. We did not pass a spending cap. We did not pass protecting the PFD. We did not pass any revenue measures. It was a real lesson, and you can know and see all the right things to do, but politically you got to get it across the finish line. And I hope that we can pick up that mantle and carry on with it. But that was discouraging.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Because again, we know the problem's there, and it seems like just ignoring it is not going to fix it. Of the three options, Justin, which one are you going to be pushing for this year? Well, I mean, of the three options that you just outlined, give me the pros and cons of each, and tell me which one you're going to be focused on this year.
Well, obviously, I'm from a major area of Alaska, and I think most people are in areas of Alaska with resources. And I think we need to focus on our resource development. And the Kenai was one of the first areas where massive oil and gas development was promoted and produced a high quality product. And obviously then the find on the North Slope, and there's still so much in the way of resource development to be done. We've had to fight our federal administration for a little bit too long, and looking forward to having maybe that burden off of our shoulders for the next 4 years. And I think there's a strike while the iron is hot, so a mentality to take to the legislature this time around.
Well, resource development, I mean, obviously, I think that's a great end goal, but we also have, as I said, 3 to 5 years before that starts to really recoup anything. And we've got a problem now. So what's the solution between now and let's just assume that the resource development part is going to go through. While we're dreaming, we might as well just throw it out there. Let's assume that it does. How do we survive in the meanwhile with $1.5 billion a year deficit going forward?
Well, I think you saw what we did the last 2 years. And I think that when faced with it, House majority and the majority of us as Republicans voted for a balanced budget with a $1,700 permanent fund dividend, which was under the statutory amount. And that every single one of us voted for that. So I think, that becomes clear, that both sides of the aisle have essentially made a choice in that regard, which is the people of Alaska seem very hesitant, to say it lightly, for taxation. Governor Dunleavy tried nobly to cut the budget quite extensively. That did not go well, and so we're left with what we've done.
The governor did cut the budget. It didn't go so. I mean, it went over. But as Kevin McCabe just mentioned in the last hour, that's one of the first things that we're going to see in this upcoming session. Is that first 5 days there's going to be an attempt. What do you see, and do you support the governor's vetoes in the upcoming? In this upcoming part of the session, this first 5 days of the session, will you be supporting the governor's vetoes in that regard?
It's interesting. There's kind of two. There are two trains of thought here. There's actually a real. I think there's a real thought that we're not going to have that question to answer, and I think the case can be made that the session that happened, the 33rd, is over and done with, and that we're going to start fresh, and we're not going to take up vetoes at all. And but if so, I think I'll deal with each one individually. And I mean, there were bills that I supported that he vetoed. There were bills that I did not support that he vetoed. And so I think there'll be sort of a deal with each thing as it affects my district and the people in my district.
Well, can you give us some specifics here? Which, I mean, the education, obviously, you were had attempted to override his previous veto, so I'm assuming you're still in favor of the education increase. Can you give us, which specific ones that you are for or against, depending on whether or not they come up for an override?
Oh, I don't have that list in front of me. If you had it, if you wanted to go through it line by line, I'd probably give you a yay or nay off of my top of my head. But budget wise, I feel like that is the prerogative of the governor. At the end there, I would uphold the governor's budget overrides, and or vetoes. Sorry, and when it comes to legislation, I think there were some good bills that were passed that I would definitely need to consider.
All right, Representative Justin Ruffridge is our guest. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't forget, you can come out and join us on Facebook if you'd like to be part of the conversation out there during the breaks. Go to facebook.com/Michael Duke Show. If you want to be part of it, just click on the live button there, and you'll join into the chat room. We'll return with more in just a moment. And Representative Justin Ruffridge, the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're in the break right here. Justin Ruffridge is our guest, and we're continuing on. So just to clarify, Representative, you said you would vote for specific bills, but you will uphold the governor's vetoes. Is that what I just heard there? Because that's his prerogative at the end. You would uphold it, but there were certain bills that you wanted that you would be interested in maybe looking at the override. So the budgetary parts you're in favor of upholding, but the other ones you may vote. Is that how I read that?
Yeah, that's really accurate. And the burden for the legislature to override a budget veto to begin with is incredibly high. I think it's 45 votes of a joint session. And so, I think that the founders of this government in Alaska made it clear that the governor should have the last word on budgets. That is a very high bar to reach, and so that's something that I think it's important to recognize and honor.
Yeah, no, and I do agree with that. I mean, 45 out of 60 means that you would have to sway a lot of people in the minority to make that happen. Again, Justin, I want to go back to the short term, because again, you're talking about both you and Kevin were both talking about the resource development as far as new revenues. And yet it seems like, because, the answer seems, new revenues, that's the answer, whether it's the resource development or whether, some people have talked about taxation as a component of it or whatever. But nobody ever talks about bringing down the size and scope of government, because number one was PFD cuts. Number three was the resources. And number two, you were talking about, what was your number two again? Because I may have misread it. I thought you were talking about bringing government back under control as far as spending, but it wasn't really about spending cuts. What was your second option?
I don't even include spending cuts in that conversation, Michael, for one reason. We talk about it all the time. And I watch as actually people valiantly make the effort to put spending cuts in place. Representative Stapp, who I know comes on this program from time to time, tried to cut one program that isn't even in existence, and was the tiniest line item in the budget, and that even doesn't make the cut, to use a pun. But it is it's another one of those things where you have an eye-opening experience, because you can sit as an armchair quarterback and you can say, cut the budget, cut the size and scope of government. And the truth is a lot of times we're handed a budget that actually, we're handed a budget that has an increase in it naturally. Government naturally grows. Inflation grows government naturally. And, it technically is a cut when you don't, increase your budget with the rate of inflation. But, it's not what I think people are thinking about when they're thinking about cutting the size and scope of government. The legislature, I think, has a difficult time holding departments accountable. It's difficult to know what's actually happening. You sort of get what you would call the dog and pony show every single session, that paraded in front of you. And, it's I'll give you one example. Here recently, we had a whole issue with libraries in our state, small libraries getting their grants cut. And that was as a direct result of budget process during the education subcommittee, where there was a request for 2 or 3 positions within the state library that's in Juneau. And we decided that we shouldn't fund that was a growth of government. And we were told, if you don't fund that, we will fund it somehow. And they funded it by cutting grants to small libraries.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's when the bureaucracy's in control, and we have a deeper problem there. That's an administrative bureaucracy problem that needs to be addressed. All right, we're going to jump back into it here. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Justin Ruffridge is our guest. We're going to keep things rolling. Let's get to it. Please like and share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
All right, we're back. Continuing now, Justin Ruffridge is our guest. We've got the upcoming session, and we have a kind of a crisis point here because we are behind the power curve as far as deficits. We're already in the hole, and it just got worse because, again, oil prices are continuing to drop a bit, and partially that's the two-edged sword of an administration that's very pro-energy. It means Alaska will probably see some great resource development in the long run, but in the short term, we see a revenue drop because the price of oil craters down. Justin, this leads us, of course, to the big questions that are coming up in this session. And of course, the things that all these politicians were promising during their election cycle. And so I want to talk about the big three and get your take and position on each one of them and how you will be looking at this. We'll start off with the defined benefits program, which is being floated out there. It didn't get a whole lot of play last session. It was in the Senate, but it died in the House. The House majority at the time didn't allow it to come to the floor, but you could see now with the changes, it's probably going to be up there. What is your take on the defined benefits and what's your position on it?
Well, that's a good question, Michael. Before I go into that, I'd like to go back just briefly to the talk about vetoes, because I found what I was looking for.
Okay.
With the question about whether or not you can bring up the vetoes of a previous session in a new session, and I think you find that in our Constitution in Article 2, where it talks about bills vetoed after adjournment of the second regular session, which we just ended, shall be reconsidered by the legislature sitting as one body no later than the 5th day of a special session of that legislature. And that legislature is now over unless we call a special session between now and January 21st. The vote of reconsideration of a vetoed bill shall be entered on the journals of both houses. So I think there's an argument that can be made that if we start a session and have not called a special session between now and then, bringing up bills that were vetoed in the previous session would be unconstitutional. So
Okay.
I just
I
wanted to
appreciate
put that forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. All right, let's dive into this defined benefits thing, though.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it, and where do you stand on the proposal itself?
Well, if we're going to talk about Senate Bill 88, I don't feel like I have a lot of information because the House did not hear that bill until I think we gave it one hearing at the very end of that session. I watched a few of the hearings. We had a couple of hearings in Labor and Commerce in the House on just defined benefits in general. And I think it's actually a thing that we need to wrestle with, and I think that's the job of the legislature to not to not address it. Just retirement in general would be a mistake, and I think I say that for one reason, which is knocking on doors in my district. It's clearly an issue that people care about. And it's an issue that people are leaving the state for other quote unquote greener pastures elsewhere in public safety and in education. And so can we go back to the gold plated program of the past? No, we can't do that. Is the defined contribution enough for people to want to do the jobs that we have here in the state for them to do? Sometimes. And I think we have a lot of questions to answer for those folks, both in, some of the issues surrounding Social Security and the windfall elimination provision. So our teachers are not able to get Social Security. That might be a thing that we need to look at, as well as all the options on the table. And I think that's what people are hoping the legislature does, is wrestle with difficult problems. To actually have contrasting actuarials, dig into the meat of the issue, and try to come up with a cogent position. A cogent position is not I am for defined benefits, do it or else, and a cogent position is not I am against defined benefits, kill it or else.
Right. Well, I think that's what
somewhere in the middle.
I think that's what Kevin McCabe was saying, is you have to have an alternate plan, and that's why he was talking about a potential for increasing defined contributions. There was a discussion, and in fact, even the Reason Foundation said that we could make our defined contributions program more competitive with other states. So would you support an idea or a bill to at least open that discussion, or what?
Oh, absolutely. I support returning just to a conversation about how do we work on our retirement system to where people are feeling like they don't have to leave for their own self-interest. And maybe that's what we want. I don't think we do, but we are in competition as much as we don't want to be with other states along the Pacific Northwest, particularly.
The other problem, of course, is that, as I said earlier, we're talking about 40,000, state and, government employees essentially across the state who would be affected, but we got 270,000 working class people. So who pays for it if it ends up being $300 million a year, let's just say, for the defined benefits? We've got a quarter of the working class being paid for by the whole state at that point, just to keep them happy. Meanwhile, everybody else is struggling to make ends meet. I mean, there's got to be some kind of balance in there.
Well, that's a loaded question there. Part of the issue already, I think, is the conversation we had earlier about the size and scope of government. When government is one of your largest employers in the state, that might be problem number one. But that's not easily fixable. I think it becomes, again, really apparent to you what part of the issues are when you do budgets in the government. And I do budgets as a small business owner all the time. And when we pay somebody, what we pay them is typically very straightforward. Here's your salary, here's a small benefit at the end, and we're done. In government budgeting, it's here is someone's salary on their step, and let's say they start off at $55,000. Well, that person might end up costing the state $150,000 at the end of the day with all of the benefits that are included. And so, it's a little bit hard to track. And frankly, the benefits are expensive. Healthcare is expensive. The defined contribution actually is expensive, and paying off what the old defined benefit is expensive. And so, I think the answer to your question is, how do you pay for it? Well, I think that's the question of the day, isn't it? With
Well, it's how we're
planning.
paying for everything that we're talking
Yeah.
about, obviously. Yeah. One of the other big issues, and we'll see if we can get to education here in a second, but I do want to touch on the gas shortage issue, because it looks like more and more that it's going to have to be some kind of importation scheme. I know everybody wants Alaskan gas, but financially and on a timeline that would actually work, there's really no practical way to get Alaska gas from the North Slope to market in a timely manner. So what do we do? What's your solution, or what's your thoughts on how we fix this upcoming potential gas issue in the Cook Inlet that's going to affect pretty much all of South Central and actually have ripple effects across the entire state?
Well, no light questions today, Michael. It's interesting, and I feel like maybe I'm grouchy this morning, so I apologize for that. But 2 years in the legislature has a way of sobering a person, where you look at something and say, well, shoot, how did we get here? And actually, both of your questions so far this morning, and it will certainly be that way when we get to education, have really left me, and it's actually how I left the 33rd legislature, with a sense of, well, these were questions that should have been asked 10 years ago. I feel like we have backed ourselves into a corner. And you just said it in your question, which is, well, there's no other practical solution other than to import gas. That's a terrible statement. And it's similar to fiscal planning. There's no other practical solution other than to have a smaller PFD.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. I don't know what we're doing here. And so, frankly, I think part of the outlook is, what do you want Alaska to look like in 2035? That's what we really need to be working on here. And I think Alaska in 2035 needs to be energy independent. That's going to take 10 years to do that, with a plan for how we pay for our stuff. And it's going to take 10 years to do that, and have a plan for how we can continue to pay the PFD to our kids and our grandkids. This is hard work. It's hard work. It's not easy work.
Well, it is, for sure. Absolutely. So, I mean, and I understand, I have been asking these questions for 25 years. And yet it seems like it's only now that some people are like, oh, yeah, that is a good question. I mean, that's part of the problem. But so, I mean, we're trying to plant a tree now, right? I mean, the old proverb of the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today, for 20 years in the future. So does that mean that we should be planting the tree of Alaskan resource, gas or something now? Should the state be involved in that? Should we be finding ways to make it more attractive to private? I mean, what do we do here? We've spent almost $2 billion through ADIA and the Port Gas Line Authority and everything else to try and get something moving, and we have almost nothing at this point. The governor's got another $50 million for feed front end design of a gas line. I mean, is this money well spent, or should we, in the meanwhile, just get on track for importation and then sit down and figure it out? What do we need to do?
Oh man. Well, if you wanted to go through, and we have a member of our House minority who has done this, and find the amount of money that we have spent on quote unquote development of a project that has almost nothing to show for it. Look no farther than the Susitna-Watana hydroelectric project. I'm pretty certain we have spent more than a couple $100 million on the production of that, and have nothing to show for it. And so, I think, Michael, that there is a real need, like you said, to plant the tree today. One of the things that I think again, a missed opportunity that now in the minority we maybe do not have the possibility to do was I think we should have been a little braver during this last session. And I think we should have pushed very, very hard on that fiscal plan. As we were, who knows what happens in the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years. We were in the position to govern, and we did a good job on a number of things. And that one was one we missed on. And we didn't plant the tree. And now we're in a position where other people are going to make the choices.
Well, you are the 33rd was just one of many legislatures that have failed to plant that tree and failed to make those decisions, and that's part of our problem. Justin Ruffridge is our guest. We're going to continue here in just a moment. We're going to be back with more. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. One final segment dead ahead. We'll be back with more and Justin Ruffridge right after these messages.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're continuing right now. Justin Ruffridge is our guest. Again, planting a tree. I'm not against doing something now to get started, but the major question that keeps popping up, Justin, is how do we pay for it? I mean, even if the state decided that they were going to take the bull by the horns and they were going to do everything, how do we pay for it with a $1.5 billion deficit starting off this year alone?
Oh, well, I mean, if you were watching any of the Ways and, or as we like to call it, the Ways to Be Mean committee, and I think you've had a number of folks on here, and I think Representative Carpenter does a really good job of going through the issues. The people of Alaska need to decide whether or not they want to pay a tax or if they want services of government cut, particularly if they want to keep a permanent fund dividend. I think it's very clear that the people of Alaska still have not come to grips with that is the decision that needs to be made. And I think that puts particularly political people in a tough spot. You might be able to see the writing on the wall, and then you feel like your constituents have backed everyone into a corner by saying, don't do that, and I still want all the things. I think I said this on your program a couple of years ago. I feel like Alaska is in its adolescence. I feel like we're not quite making adult decisions just yet. I hope we grow up here one of these days here soon.
Well, if we are in our adolescence, somebody has to be the adult in the room, and we're hoping that the legislators, somebody will step up and be the adult. I mean, that's the thing, Justin, is that we've got a lot of go along to get along, and we've got a lot of people who spent this whole election cycle saying they were going to put a chicken in every pot and they were going to do all these things, and yet nobody ever talked about where the money's going to come from. And even if
actually, Michael, that's not true, because I happen to live in a place where someone did do that, knocked on a gajillion doors, and didn't get the votes. And you've had that individual on this program a number of times, and I think a lot of people were watching the Carpenter-Bjorkman race for that exact reason. Ben was bold about that fiscal plan, and so what does that do to people who like to stay elected, Michael, when they see somebody go out there, put their neck on the line, say, this is what I think, and I'm going to try to influence people in that direction?
Well, but I mean, what I'm saying is the people that did get elected, a lot of them spent time going out there saying, we're going to do this. We're going to put defined benefits. We're going to increase the education. We're going to take care of this gas issue. We're going to spend all this money. And they got elected doing it, right?
But Michael, here's the question, right? Is this a problem of the elected official, or the electorate in general.
Oh no,
The people
I'm not saying it's not an electorate problem. I'm just saying that's when it goes back to what I'm saying is somebody has to be the adult in the room. Somebody has to say, okay, guys, I know you promised a chicken in every pot, but where does the money come from for all these chickens? Right? I mean, how are we going to do that? It's a self-licking ice cream cone. It's because once the PFD is gone, then what are you going to do? Then it's going to be, oh, well, now you guys got to pay your fair share. Now your free ride's over. Now you got to pay taxes. And like you said, talking about backing ourselves into a corner over and over and over again, that's what we keep doing.
Yeah, you're absolutely not wrong. And I think there's a case to be made that, people don't naturally, make good decisions for themselves, both in their personal life, sometimes in their business life, or in their, political life. And sometimes we, I don't know how many folks have to, Dave Ramsey has a very popular radio program for a reason. People like to spend a lot of money, and then they have to get into, a really bad position before they choose to make changes.
That's true. I mean, that's a 100% truth right there. We're down to the last minute here, so we're going to continue on. I want to talk a little bit about education, and then I got some other messages from last week after you were on the program. So people asked some questions, which we'll get to as well. I'm just going through here to see if there's anything that I can, if there's anything. The long trail. No, I mean the long trail again. Something that doesn't really generate much of anything, and yet we're expending it. Again, it's all these nice to haves versus the must haves, right? I mean, that's the bottom line here. All right, Justin Ruffridge is our guest. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Make sure that you like and share the show wherever you are, from wherever you're watching it or wherever you're listening to it. If you're listening to it on the podcast, make sure you give us a rating and review wherever you're listening to it. And we'll continue. Here we go. 10 seconds out. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Oh, man. 5 seconds. Here we go. 4, 3, 2.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Dukes Show.
All right, we're continuing now. One final segment with Justin Ruffridge, representative from down on the Kenai. And we're going to continue. Justin, after last week, I got a bunch of messages through Facebook and emails and stuff. And there was a lot of them asking the same question, which I was not. So I'm going to ask, there was one that was kind of the nicest asking this question. And this was the question. And I'm not really familiar with what's going on, so maybe you can explain it to us. The question was, is it common practice for legislators to sign another legislator's name to a bill to move it out of committee onto the floor for a vote, even when the legislator is not in Juneau and is not given express permission? Now, I heard something about this, but I don't really know what's going on. Is that common practice, or can you explain to me what that is in regards to?
No, I have no, that is not common practice. And I don't know what that's referring to.
Okay. I guess because some of the less nice comments said something about you had signed somebody's name as a committee member to a bill or something to move it out on the floor. And I didn't know. I hadn't heard about it until just recently when people started asking the question. So it's not common practice, and it's not something that you would do.
No.
Okay. All right. I had so many of the same question or in the same vein. I was like, that's weird. I hadn't heard about it. So, all right. So that's it. Let's move over to education, because again, you were one of the few on the majority side that decided to try and override the governor's veto, which there still weren't enough. You said that it was because you believe in education. Now, the problem with education funding that we're talking about right now is the difference between inside the formula and outside the formula, because inside the formula basically indebts us to it forever. Like moving forward, whatever we put inside the formula, we're committed to no matter what. I guess unless they open up the formula again, which is very difficult to do. But or you said last time you're not a huge fan of one-time funding. So what is the valid solution for this problem between the fact that we don't have a lot of money, we don't necessarily want to commit ourselves in perpetuity to a certain amount, but you're not a fan of one-time funding. So is there a middle road there somewhere? What's your position?
Well, I think, again, education is always the hot button topic. And, for a lot of reasons. One, we fund it based off of a formula, and we don't really do anything that way except for the permanent fund dividend. And that's not a formula that we've been following. And so it always has this sort of other, I guess, pressure process to it. If you look at actually government over the last 5 to 6 years, we have increased the cost of everything by, a large percentage. The Department of Corrections has increased by 40% in 5 years. Education has gone down by 5% in the same period of time. And so I think part of this is a priorities question. And I think there's a case to be made. But I want to push back a little on the statement that you made about the bill being supported because of funding. In truth, SB 140 to me was supported for a number of the other reasons. And I said this on the House floor many times. I said it to the governor when, having conversations about veto or not veto. I said, I was very clear from day one. If we get into that position, it will be a vote for me to continue this bill. That bill had 3 elements in it that were components that I had written or authored, and one was parity of funding for homeschool families, so going from 90% of the BSA amount to 100%. One was continuing the education tax credit program, and the other was charter school language to have a individual within the Department of Education to help with charter school applications, because these were all 3 big issues from my constituency. I think we have one of the largest homeschool populations in the state of Alaska here on the Kenai. And that's why you saw at the end of last session a lot of work being done from my office to make sure that folks were able to homeschool in this upcoming year. So, I think I get pegged sometimes as the just pay for it guy in education. I think there was a lot more strategy involved in SB 140, where you try to find where we were going to spend money anyway, and also have a win for conservative people, a
Right.
win for the type of education system that I think is important to promote.
No, I mean, I would agree. I would agree that all 3 aspects that you just talked about, those were all good things in that bill. But
Yep.
again, it came down to the amount of money that was in it, that I think that was why the governor had vetoed it. That was what he said. But I agree with you. There are great components to that bill, but that's the problem. When you Christmas tree something up, you've got good stuff, and then you add all the ancillary stuff, that's when it becomes problematic, right?
Well, we spent the money anyway. And I agree with you, Michael, that it's a little different to do one-time funding versus tying you down for long term. But we spent the money anyway. We've been spending a lot of money on education. One-time funding, again, going back to responsible, being the adult in the room, any government entity that I have ever seen function, if you give them a pot of money and say, this is one time, the only thing they use that for is for stuff that is not long-term. That's all they can use it for. You can't use it for hiring people because you're not certain that that's going to be money that you have in the future. You use it essentially for capital projects. That's kind of how it gets used. A lot of that money does not trickle down to charter schools. And a lot of that money does not trickle down to correspondence schools either. And so I think it is not the best way to do education funding. And until I see evidence to the contrary, that will continue to be my position.
Well, I mean, the problem is that when we do, and I agree with you, there's problems on both ways. But when we do commit to something that we know that we're going to spend it year on, and it's never just a small. I mean, now we're talking about Loki Tobin mentioned the $1,800 the other day. And somebody else, one of the other districts, in an op-ed or something mentioned 1,800. It was 600, and then it was 1,413 or 1,416 or whatever, and now it's 1,800. The problem is that it's always this enormous amount, and if we're already $1.5 billion upside down, how can we add the $4 or $5 or $600 million to that and make it sustainable and lock us into it moving forward? I mean, that essentially, again, talked about painting us into a corner. That again paints us into a corner down the road. Should the formula just change so that it's not automatic? Is that a better answer? Should we open it back up and make it so that it has to be addressed every year instead of just being automatic? Is that a better way to do it?
Well, I think there's two things there. One, I think we should open the formula up. I've been a proponent of that since the, chairing or co-chairing education for the last 2 years. It seems clear there's some things in there that is fraught with a lot of concerns if you open it up. But I do think it does need to be opened up. The second element in there, I think that's maybe a little more long-term thinking, and it's a budgetary question just in general, which is, one of the issues is school districts are doing their budgets usually starting at the first of the year. They start kind of looking through what is going to happen. Their fiscal year starts at the same time that the state's fiscal year does, on July 1st. And if we fight about the amount of education funding up until May, 20th, it's hard for them to budget for the next year. And so I think it'd be nice. It's a little impossible to do right now, but because we don't have dollars to deal with, but to basically have a 2-year budgetary cycle where you say this is something you can count on, and sort of be a year ahead if you could do that. And that way folks aren't, consistently, it doesn't become the huge political fight that it's been for the last long while.
Well, and we know that a lot of times things like, the cycles that the schools have done and the policies of, pink slipping teachers and giving them notice at a certain point. We know this is all basically theaterized to put more pressure on the legislature and do things like that because those cycles are so aligned. And that's problematic in and of itself. But we're down to the last 90 seconds. So I want to give you the floor for the last 90 seconds here on the air and give people your thoughts on what's coming up or anything else you have between now and the start of the session.
Well, as always, it's really good to be with you on the radio. I really enjoy the long form discussion. You're right. I think it's, a good thing to be able to have these discussions. As always, I like to talk to people. And so if folks have questions, it might be easier to just reach out to me directly. All my contact information is really public. And maybe not wait for me to be on this radio program to ask me a question. Although
Sure.
It is fun to be on the show as well. So
we'll try and bring you back on the program here throughout the session every month or so and get your take on where things are going and see what you have to say so that you can be in touch with the people who are here ready to ask you questions. Justin Ruffridge, thank you so much. Hold the line for just a second. Folks, we're out of time. Tomorrow, Brad Keithley, Chris Story. Oh, the whipping will continue. The Michael Duke Show. All right, so final bite at the apple here. Justin, I give you the last couple minutes. Anything else, something we didn't hit on that you wanted to talk about or touch base on or anything else? Now's the time to do it.
No, I think, we went through budgets, education, energy. I guess what did we miss, Michael?
I think we got a lot of it right now. The PFD,
Wow.
Defined benefits. But I guess the biggest question that we still don't have an answer for is how do we pay for it all? And that's the question that we've been asking on this program in one form or another for 20 years. And
I think my takeaway from this session today is plant a tree. That's my takeaway. It's time. We got to plant that tree. And I appreciate the work that you do on this show, making people aware of the need for that. And I think that's going to take a lot of courage and a lot of work to do it, but it's time to do so.
Well, somebody's going to have to be the adult in the room, as you said earlier. Somebody's going to have to grab the reins and pull back and say, whoa, guys, we can't keep doing what we're doing. And hopefully, you'll step up and be one of those people that say, we can't continue the way we're going right now and expect different results. That's the definition of insanity at this point. All right, Justin Ruffridge, thank you so much for coming on board. We appreciate it. We look forward to talking to you again after the new year. Merry Christmas, and thanks for being part of it.
Thanks. Merry Christmas to you too.
All right, appreciate it. Okay, folks. Well, that does it for me. I got conference calls and stuff to get to here shortly, so we're going to go do our thing this final week of broadcast for the Michael Duke Show. All right, we'll be back with you guys tomorrow morning. Brad Keithley, Chris Story. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.